This is Stephanie March, food editor of Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine, and fellow foodies, it's the most wonderful time of the year, the Minnesota State Fair. And not only are foods on a stick, I'm bringing you a podcast on a stick. It's a show released daily during the run of the fair, covering the fair's best of the best, the must-eats, the new foods, the old favorites, plus events, hidden gems, and the shows you can't miss. We're going to cover it all. Just listen to Podcasts on a Stick. Find episodes on the Podcast One app or wherever you find your podcasts.
The following is a Podcast One Minnesota production.
For those who simply can't get enough talk about the Vikings, we present Bonus Chatter. Bonus chatter about your favorite team that's unscripted, unfiltered, and uninterrupted. This is another edition of 1500 ESPN's Purple Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Purple Podcast. Matthew Coller here, along with ESPN's Courtney Cronin. And we showed up this morning during a lightning storm, and you got stuck outside because of security.
Yes.
And had to wait for a while in said lightning storm. But once we got in the building, then Mike Zimmer called his own press conference to announce that the Minnesota Vikings are not trading Anthony Barr.
There was an alleged report that he felt the need to respond to, which that is so out of character. This is not somebody who responds to rumors or any sort of speculation.
Right. So it was a very strange day because none of us could figure out where this report came from or what he was referencing, and we still, at this very moment, do not know. But what was interesting to me is how effusive Mike Zimmer was in his praise for Anthony Barr, that he wanted to make it very clear how much he appreciates Anthony Barr and how much he adds to the defense, and opposing offenses have to factor in Anthony Barr when they're game planning against the Minnesota Vikings. And he went on and on about all these things that Anthony Barr can do. So my question for you, Courtney, is how does this end with Anthony Barr? Does it end with long-term contract extension 3 days from now, trade to Cleveland 3 days from now, or does it end up with us just going through this all year with him on his fifth-year option, and then we don't know?
I don't think Anthony Barr will be with the Vikings in 2019. I don't think they can afford him and his value. I think that if you do sign him to an extension now, you price yourself out of free agency for the next 1 or 2 years at least. That's not a position that they want to be in because you have to factor in, yes, there are restructures that are certainly on the table next season between Kyle Rudolph, who has a $7.5 million hit in 2019. Andrew Sendejo has a $5.5 million hit. What about Sheldon Richardson? What if you really like him? What if he is the crux to this three technique position that Mike Zimmer values so much among his defensive line and his front seven that you want to retain him? I don't think you'll be able to. So, and it's not based on anything from the last 2 days that makes me believe that. I felt that after they signed Stephon Diggs, that's probably the last one that they're going to get done. Now, would it surprise me, given the circumstances of the last few days, that he does get a contract extension and it does happen some point during camp? Not at all. There's ways to make this happen. I'm not saying it's financially impossible. You can move money around, and I had an article up the other day detailing what they could do right now and what they could potentially do if they want to franchise tag him. I just don't think that. While Mike Zimmer said Anthony's one of his guys, it was the first guy he drafted when he got here. He's always been a big proponent of his guys. I remember asking him at the Combine, and Barr is among the group of, very small group of players that he's, stand on a table. That's what he referred to them as. Somebody he really, really likes part of the system. I just don't know if it's financially the best decision for them to do because of what the restrictions are if they do sign him.
So you want to do a pie chart?
Oh, God.
Okay. So
I don't think I can handle this.
Yes,
it's been a long day of camp, and I just don't think the math is there. Okay.
It wasn't a great day for either one of us. I got shot down in an interview. A guy outweighted you, and you didn't get him. So
seriously, my problem is I showed up to work. I didn't put 150% effort in waiting.
That's right.
I waited 15 minutes. Had I waited 16, I probably would have gotten said player cough, Jaleel Johnson.
So of the three outcomes, how are you divvying up your percentages of the pie chart?
Let's just go 33%, and 30%. No, I'm kidding. Let me just pull word out.
Do you need an actual pie chart to look at this?
Well, no,
it's just out of 100%.
I know that. I have to just put the percentages down. All right. Let's do, I'm going to say 40% for the first, for my first thing I'm going to say here is that he walks in 2019.
40% that he leaves.
In 2019.
So that means you have 60% to
here,
still
yes.
work with. Yes.
This is good. I'm going to go 25% chance that they get something done in camp.
So that leaves you with 35% that he is traded?
Actually, let's... I knew this was not going to work. I'm so sorry to everybody listening. I actually forgot what the other option was. All right.
But let's go through.
Cut. Let's just start this over again.
Let's go through the evidence here for all three outcomes. Okay.
Okay.
So
can we start with trade?
Let's start with trade. I think that coming out and having a press conference about how you're not going to trade someone makes everyone think you're going to trade someone.
It just seems like where there's smoke, there's fire. No?
Yes, of course it does.
So, okay, let's start with trade. I'm going to actually, just delete this that I just wrote out. I'm going to put the trade at 10%.
Okay.
I don't think it's likely. As somebody pointed out to, I think, both of us on Twitter, that this kind of sounds like something that might have happened before with Percy Harvin.
I mean, it happens all the time with owners who give coaches a vote of confidence. Like, we are not firing Coach John, and then Coach John is out the door with one more loss.
Yeah, no, there's no reason for me to really think that something would happen now with a trade, and there's reason for that. There's no trade partner. You're not trading. There's not one for one. You're not going to go trade Anthony. The rumor that was out there, I think, is the one that people were freaking out about. So they were going to try to get Khalil Mack in here somehow, which you'd be trading more than Anthony Barr to get Khalil Mack. Let's put that out there. There's no trade partner, because if you're going into it thinking, okay, my window to win right now, I need an offensive lineman. Teams don't have tackles available, honestly, unless you're Oakland.
There's only 16 good tackles in the whole league anyway.
Yes,
they're not trading.
You wouldn't trade Barr for a guard. I mean, you've got Remmers at guard, and he's going to be, if he doesn't practice the next few days, even if he doesn't practice, the next week, 2 weeks, he's going to be fine. I have confirmation that he is absolutely slow playing this, and it's smart because he's a 7-year vet. There's no reason to rush it. Anyways, so there's no trade partner. If you're going to trade Anthony Barr for some conditional picks in 2019 and players to be named later, I don't know why you do that right now, because what team's going to want to get Anthony Barr and then be like, wow, we got to pay him a ton because of what he could potentially do this season, and then obviously his contract's up. So it doesn't make sense. There's just not a lot of logical options as why a trade would be involved, but I'll put it at 10%. Where there's smoke, there's fire. It was a weird response on Anthony's part yesterday by saying that, talk to the head man, that it was something that, there was a reason why he missed practice. Mike Zimmer said it was a tweak. We don't know what was tweaked because he doesn't talk about injuries, and he actually deferred to you on that during the interview this morning.
And I botched it, to be honest.
You did not do your best press secretary. You were, what was the first guy that Trump had that got fired? Sean Spicer. You are Sean Spicer.
I really didn't do a great job. He deferred to me to answer the injury question.
Exactly.
And I just said, we don't talk about injuries in training camp. And that was the best I could do. And then I said, we'll keep it internal.
Yeah. Sarah Sanders would have been very displeased in you, but you could have forcefully delivered that.
Yeah, you're right. I could have used the moose and the lamb, right? Remember the SNL thing? So the evidence for a trade, there isn't a lot.
Very little. But I do think it is weird because there just seems like there was something. This could have been very easily handled. Anthony saying vet day. It was a vet day yesterday. Yeah. Lie if you have to, because this whole thing opened up an unnecessary can of worms.
Right. You could have just said, I don't want to talk about it. I tweaked something and I don't want to talk about it. He could have done that too.
That's not going in injuries. You're fine if you do that.
So the next category. So you're putting 10% on that. I will.
Yes.
I will agree with you. We'll do this together.
Okay.
I will agree with you. 10%. It's very low. I might even put it lower, but we'll stay with 10%. I don't. I just don't think there's a huge chance because of what are your options to get back. Jamie Collins was traded by the Patriots. That was really stunning. They took a draft pick back, right? Mm-hmm. And this team is really not in a position to take a draft pick back for a starting linebacker.
No.
And who are you going to put in for him? Ben Gideon? No, he's a one-dimensional run stuffer.
Eric Wilson,
right?
That's
Kentrell
the next
brothers.
in line.
I mean, like these guys
suspended the first 4 games, so it's not even an option.
Right. These are not guys who can play really starting linebacker in the NFL
and be a hybrid pass rusher.
Right.
Like,
so
no.
very unlikely unless you were trading him for some other linebacker who was going to start. And if you are trading for a guard or tackle, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it doesn't really help you at all.
No.
So
next one is
the contract extension comes soon. I put a high percentage on this one because Zimmer was so defensive to run out there and say, no, we love Anthony Barr. We're not trying to trade him. I feel like it was a message to Anthony Barr that it's
going to happen.
Maybe not so much it's going to happen, but maybe if they really are desperately trying to keep him, which you could see Zimmer fighting tooth and nail for that because it's his defense. And you notice that every time something happens on offense, he gets something on defense. So Kirk Cousins comes in and then Sheldon Richardson, and Zimmer's got a huge smile on his face. Well, you had Kendricks and Hunter, but then Stephon Diggs. So it's like if you're going to sign Diggs, then let me keep my guy, Anthony Barr too. So I put this one pretty high that they will just try to work around all the money situation and do the best they can. And I think that's what it was. I think he was coming out and sending a message. No, Anthony, don't take this that we want to get rid of you. We want to keep you around and sign you to an extension.
I think that they made this thing worse by addressing the rumor. That's not even a rumor. Okay, I'm over it because I think
no, it's not a rumor.
I think Zimmer made this worse. To be quite honest,
this was only dark web.
Okay, what's the percentage that you put on it? And you said we're betting that this is the extension coming soon, as in training camp, because
before the season.
Before season, okay. I don't think I okay. That just what's your percentage?
I'll say 50.
All right.
I'm going to say there is a 50% chance that they decide they're going to work it out with him, and the only thing that could be a holdup would be the other 30%, 40%, just like I said, would be that Anthony Barr simply just wants to get the most dollars he can possibly get, which would mean he signs wherever next year, that he takes his $12 million this year and is a happy man, and then takes whatever number of dollars someone lays out in front of him, and that's all he cares about, which is fine, and I would not criticize him for. But considering what people get paid, if you go out on the free agent market as a guy with his talent, someone's going to go crazy. There's always a team that
Cleveland. With Jamie Collins. That's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, a team that has a rookie quarterback that can afford it. If you draft a rookie quarterback, and there was a bunch of them that came into the league, what happens a lot is you have cap space because you're not spending it on the rookie quarterback. So Cleveland has signed Collins and Michael Kendricks and a bunch of other guys, these offensive linemen. You could see him feeling the same way. Let me go out there and see how much money I can possibly get. And that's why I think that one is almost as likely as he signs here sometime soon.
We talked about this on the way out yesterday, that maybe he didn't practice because he was getting close to a deal. That still hasn't actually been ruled off the table. The thought of, him tweaking something, well, hey, maybe you're close to a deal, maybe, take the day off, something like that. But it just, the delivery, we're journalists. We read people's body language. We read how people react and how they speak. That just didn't add up to me.
When he was saying ask Zimmer, ask the head man,
it just kind of seemed like this is out of my hands.
Right.
You're going to have to ask him.
That's what it sounded like. So it was an odd answer, and maybe it didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Continue.
Anyways. So I'm going to put the extension coming soon at 35%.
You got to use all the percentages. I thought we agreed.
No, because then I have 55% to use as he's not going to be here next year. Thanks for making me spoil everything. So I have 10% on the trade, 35% the extension comes soon.
Okay, so you have less on the extension coming soon than I do.
Yes. Was that not clear?
Oh, I thought we were working together.
No, we're not. Well, we work together on the trade. I am not with you here. You said 50% on the extension coming soon. I think it's less than that.
Okay.
All right. We really are bad at math.
It's just charts.
It's so hard.
And lists.
Everything.
And really anything that we could use on this podcast.
There are people listening to this right now shaking their heads being like, I'm going to buy you, what was that? What was the thing that kids used to use?
I mean, all we really need is
hooked on phonics for math. Is there a thing like that?
We just need Microsoft Word.
I'm doing this in Microsoft Word currently.
And still botching it?
No,
So what's
you're the one who... Okay, anyways.
What is your case for...
The extension coming soon?
Not coming soon.
Well, to me, his value of where he could potentially see himself is within that $11.5, $12 million range. Do the Vikings want to give him something like that? Well, wouldn't they have already given it to him? The argument of Diggs over Barr after Hunter went through, that to me just doesn't seem like something that they'd want to do right now. Play out your season, make $12.3 million this year. We're not hurting on the cap. We're fine. To me, it seems like, all right, let's see what your value is going to be after you add these pass rushing moves and part of your repertoire. Would we potentially be wanting to, if I'm the Vikings, thinking, okay, franchise tag is still an option. It's expensive as heck. It's $15.5 million next year for a linebacker, which that's absurd. That's more than like Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin are making this season, and that's all estimated. We don't know the exact figure yet, but Jason Fitzgerald from Over the Cap and I were writing a story the other day, and that's the estimated figure. Because you take the top 10 salaries, what have you. So I just don't know right now. Considering there was some speculation before the draft that Barr wanted out of Minnesota. Certainly none of that has been publicly addressed, but that is what I had heard for months. And, that to me, nothing obviously got done. So there still might be some of that and where he might want to go and make more and not take a team-friendly deal. I can't fault him for not wanting to take a team-friendly deal, which would be about Kendrick's price. And, certainly he's going to want to make more than Kendrick's.
Do you ever wonder if there is some lingering effect of Mike Zimmer and what he said about Anthony Barr?
Yes.
Because Zimmer has tried so hard, and this includes this right here today, what we saw. Zimmer has tried so hard since that day to say overly positive things about Anthony Barr. He went into the whole thing about drafting him last year. That I think that comment from Zimmer, though, was just kind of an off comment, and Zimmer was battling the eye issue. And
what you're referring to is that he was coasting.
Yes, that he was coasting. I think that has stayed with Anthony Barr. I would guess that. And I know that it kind of shook the locker room in 2016 at the end. And you would think that there was enough time in between here. But there is always the chance that he's kind of hung on to that, of how hard Zimmer was toward him in public, and whether he would decide, you know what, maybe I'm just not going to stay here, and I'm going to find somebody who's going to pay me and not say something like that about me in public. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
I could just see it. If you're putting in that bucket of reasons why he could leave, money is by far number one. But if there was a number two, maybe he sees himself as a pass rusher. Do you know?
They didn't use him as one. The first 4 years of his career here, guy had 23.5 sacks in college. Yes, he was drafted as a 4-3 outside linebacker, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's completely off the table.
So I'm trying to remember the story here, and I'm looking it up, of Kevin Green. You know Kevin Green? So Kevin Green, early in his career, the Rams had him not rushing the passer a whole lot. And then they made a change, and he had 16.5 sacks 2 years in a row, became one of the best pass rushers of all time. And I wonder if Barr, I asked him yesterday, hey, is this pass rushing thing, is that like your idea or their idea? And he really wouldn't say. He kind of said, well,
we tried it, and, for whatever reason is what he said.
Right.
They stopped doing it. So kind of just like, there's subtle digs here that, as I told you, I think Barr being gone is more of a financials thing, that the two sides aren't going to agree on worth versus what the team wants to give you and what they can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if there's a number one reason why he ends up going eventually, that will be it.
Yours, then if it's, 40%
so
is what you're saying.
I had 40%. Yeah. I think that they find a way to convince Anthony Barr to stay, and that maybe rushing the passer is part of that conversation, but maybe he wants to see it in action first. And this is where it is really fun. And just to be clear to Mike Zimmer, we are not reporting any of this.
No, this is all we're going through scenarios.
It is all just possible scenarios, just in case. There is no report happening here about him being traded. But, when we're talking about whether he stays or whether he goes, I think it will ultimately come down to what type of role he's playing and also what type of money he's making.
Yeah.
If Zimmer is going to stand up there and talk about his secret value that you can't put down in sack numbers, well, then then Barr can come back and say, well, then pay me with that. Make sure you give me what I'm asking. And I don't think he's wrong to try to maximize his own value. And if they can find a spot there, then they ultimately get it done. That's how I look at it. So I give more of a chance that they get it done because this team just seems to keep all the players they want and then work
And
around.
he is part of the core. I mean, for the last 4 years, he's been a very valued member of this defense, and I think they want to keep him. I'm not saying, I believe Rick Spielman when he says, we try to keep this entire group and keep our window open as long as possible. But he also made a good point at the end, talking with the agents and representation, that it's never like, oh, well, we win and you lose type situation. It's, sometimes we're asking a little bit more. It's there's a give and a take here from the representation side and from the Vikings of what we can offer you, what we're asking, what you want. It's a fine line to walk, but they've done it so far, and I think this was a distraction. I'm not going to lie. I think today was kind of a distraction, and I wonder, because it didn't need to be. This could have been handled a lot differently, and it's almost like maybe it just kind of came to a head. Maybe some people were in their feelings. I don't know. We may never know. Curious what the tweak was, because he was out there. He looked fine, just fine today.
It's still a situation that leaves a lot of questions to be answered as we go forward. Don't you love about football in covering on a daily basis how many feelings there are?
So many emotions.
Isn't it crazy? Like Stephon Diggs is crying at the podium the other day, or like holding back tears. I saw Randy Moss hold back tears one day. I've seen Zimmer cry
How
a couple
could you
times.
see Randy hold back tears behind those Gucci sunglasses that he was wearing at the Hall of Fame?
Not today at the Hall of Fame, but when
he wore them last night, too. I don't think he took them off.
When he did his press conference here when he was going in the Ring of Honor, and he got choked up, it is amazing the number of feelings that end up being in this game. For
this man's game.
Yeah. It's great.
And men don't have feelings, is what I was told.
And I love that they, how many people are willing to share how much they love each other. So,
John DiFilippo being like, I love that guy.
Yes.
Football, I love that guy.
I love that guy. And, with Dalvin Cook today, asked about Latavius Murray, and he's talking about how he's an older brother to him, and I love that guy.
Here's my thing with love. They throw around that word, pretty loosely. To me, love is unconditional, and it's like, would you run in front of a car for me? Is that how much you love me? No, of course not. I don't want to break my leg.
I think you should have followed up with that.
Okay, this podcast is getting off the rails. Should we talk about Andrew Sendejo?
If you want to.
Talking about somebody who really loves football.
Do you have a take on it? I don't.
think it's nonsense. I think it's ignorance on his part. What we're referring to is obviously the Make Football Violent Again hat that it first came to my attention on Thursday. So after the referee, and this really stems from the rules symposium, let's call it that. The players had a presentation given to them on Thursday night from Pete Morelli, who's the head of NFL officials, or an NFL, I think not the head, but he's a top NFL official. Refereed the 2009 NFC Championship game for those of you who want to relive that. And they were saying that the Barr hit was is illegal this year. Really didn't make sense. Mike Zimmer was confused by it, but someone replied to a story I wrote about it. With a picture, it said, make football violent again, and it was clearly Sendejo. I didn't know when that hat was from. I didn't know if it was minicamp, but clearly it was from yesterday. So today I walk in, dude's wearing the same hat. I'm like, okay, if you're wearing it, you're asking to be asked about it. Do not give me any of that nonsense where it's like you're putting it out there like, I can wear whatever I want. It is a strong, pointed message that you're directing towards the NFL. And when I talked to him, it was about a minute and 13 seconds. One-word answers. He clearly does not believe that this rule is going to help him in any way. And then he goes out and sends a tweet where talking about putting the face mask on top of his helmet, and the whole new helmet rule is you can't lead with the head. Well, if he puts that up there, that certainly would make it more dangerous. I think it's disrespectful. I really don't think that it's a smart thing to do, to put these things out there when, go ask Mike Wallace what he thinks of that. I understand the position you play is going to become a lot more difficult with this. Everybody else has said players adapt, and they're being asked a lot. Anthony Barr has been through the ringer. Andrew Sendejo got suspended one game last year for the hit on Mike Wallace in the first quarter of the Baltimore game. Anthony Barr went through hell, and I'm just going to say that because I honestly felt really bad for him. All the backlash he got because of a split second really, what is he supposed to do? Because they were saying he drove the quarterback into the ground and it was him rolling off. I don't know. And if he's willing to adapt, I think that if he's not, up in arms about this, I don't think that it justifies what Andrew Sendejo said with the message on his hat.
It reminds me of a few years ago where people like James Harrison came out and they started saying, the whole, what are we supposed to do? And you can't even breathe on the quarterback these days, and on and on and on. And players were really up in arms. I mean, this was probably now 10 years ago when this happened. And then everybody adapted to the rules, and they all just changed the way they played, and it's all been fine.
Yeah,
there hasn't been a huge issue since then, and the players got over it. They changed their technique. They knew what they could and could not do. And there were a few calls in Vikings games that they just had to deal with. Tom Johnson got one against the Arizona Cardinals in 2016.
Remember the roughing the passer call he got this past year?
Yes, where he was falling into Drew Brees, I think.
Drew Brees' leg, and he couldn't help it.
Right. And Anthony Barr got one, too, I think against Chicago comes to mind here. It might have been L.A., but he got another one where it was a roughing the passer, and it looked kind of like a clean hit, and it was hard to say, and there's always been those debates. But for the most part, the players have just said, okay, we're going to adapt to the rules, and that's how it's going to be. And it hasn't really been a big conversation. But with this Hall of Fame game combined with what Sendejo's doing, I've seen that picked up now everywhere.
Yeah.
Like TMZ Sports has his hat that they're showing and talking about it and what message that he is sending. And I think that there's just overreaction to this. Like, if you look at what they did in the Hall of Fame game, they called everything. Mm-hmm. One of the hits was clearly illegal no matter whether it was last year or this year, and they would have called it anyway. And so they're going to call everything, and then they're going to get together as the preseason goes along and say what works, what doesn't work, and then we'll move on from there. This has happened many times with rule changes, where they practice in the preseason on different rules. Everyone gets totally upset, and we all talk about it. And then when we get to the regular season, it's fine. That's how I imagine this being. It's fine. And I know the team was really upset about Sendejo's hit on Wallace being suspendable last year.
He knocked the guy's helmet off, and it was like a blindside hit. I don't think there's any reason to be upset about it. What he did was wrong.
But they argued they had the free Sendejo shirts.
Congratulations, they were wrong. That, by the definition, and hold on. Let me pull up what the actual rule is and what the one he got suspended for. He tried to appeal it. The rule itself says, quote, there shall be no unnecessary roughness. That shall include, but not limited to, using any part of the player's helmet or face mask to butt, spear, or ram an opponent violently and unnecessarily. The guy was already, wasn't he? He couldn't, it was a blindside hit anyways. Was he not already being tackled, if I can't remember correctly?
He was going down to the ground,
yes,
and then Sendejo hit him.
That's has no place in this game. I don't care if the meathead attitude out there is that, and honestly, Donald Trump kind of incited that with, I saw that in a TMZ article where he said, taking away the beautiful tackles of the game. It's dangerous. There's no reason for it. It's not the freaking XFL. Stop with that nonsense. To me, that's BS. I could get a lot more heated about it because the Danny Trevathan hit last year nearly killed a guy and made him paralyzed. That is dangerous. We do not need that in football. And if I just don't understand where the logic is that don't lead with your head. It's not that hard. And
I think they looked at probably Ryan Shazier too, hurting himself. And I think it's as much about hurting other players as it is guys hurting themselves. So the NFL, I think over the last decade, has done a really nice job of finding the places where a lot of the severe injuries were coming from and then moving away from them. And kickoffs would be one of them. Yes, I miss kickoff returns. I want 70 kickoff returns a year because it's
Devin
fun.
Hester. That was my childhood.
Dante Hall. I mean, there's a lot of them that were really, really good and fun. But the NFL said, we got to make changes here. Mm-hmm. We got to change some of these rules around because there are just too many people getting hurt. And they've balanced that well with you haven't seen NFL fans. If you look at the attendances and you look at the ratings, you haven't seen fans leaving this game because, it's not violent enough. And with what Sendejo's saying, it's fine. It's kind of like what I expect from Andrew Sendejo because he kind of does stuff like this. And overall, though, he's going to have to play the game probably a little bit of a different way. He's always been a bit of a missile where he just sort of goes 110% at somebody to try and knock him out. And he's just going to have to tweak that, or this isn't going to work for him. So you can wear all the hats you want, but that's going to be the rules. And I would also trust the league here, and I know that I don't trust them on much, but I would trust the league here that they will eventually normalize to get this right. I don't think they'll ever get a catch right. We'll see. But this one, I think that they will find the right area, and everyone who's tweeting, oh, this is going to be the worst thing ever. Jeff Schwartz, former Vikings offensive lineman, wrote a column for SB Nation about this, how he's seen it a million times. They put in a rule, and then they work out the kinks in preseason, and by the regular season, it's good to go. So that's my expectation, and any of these statements that are being put out there, like with Sendejo's hat, it just doesn't really matter. You have to play by the rules no matter what, or you can leave.
Absolutely. I have to round this up, I have no issue with the rule itself. The only thing I took away from the presentation yesterday, I'm very confused as to the explanation with Anthony Barr's hit.
Yep,
that's a 15-yard roughing the passer penalty that's always been in place. You take a look at the language that's in there about not driving a player to the ground. Well, we hear from Pete Morelli, well, it's all, the real problem here was the driving force, and that's always been a penalty. So if it was if it was, the whole not reestablishing outside the pocket, what are you supposed to do? Aaron Rodgers pump fakes all the freaking time, and he was not set or established. Maybe we should clarify what being set and established outside the pocket means, because that was certainly not made clear to us, not made clear to Mike Zimmer. It's almost like they missed a call. Barr was not flagged for this last year.
Or suspended or penalized in any way.
You hear the speculation, oh, well, they want their stars in the game. This is to make it like flag football for quarterbacks. You can't hit the red jersey. I just don't, my issue with this whole thing is it was not explained well at all. And what's out there is convoluted, and I wonder if you go to Green Bay to hear the same type of presentation, if it's explained the exact same way as it was to us and the Vikings players.
Seems to me like they're just backpedaling on botching that should have been a penalty last year, and it should have been a suspension or some sort of fine. That by the rule, what he did, letting his entire body weight come down on Rodgers and hurting him, that should have been some sort of penalty. But since it wasn't, they decided to go back and go, well, we've gotten a lot of flack from the Packers about that, so we're now going to tell everyone that that's a penalty, and that's supposed to make it right. And it just doesn't really look good for them. When they could, and this is typical NFL, they could just be like, you know what, last year we made a mistake, and we probably should have penalized him, and we will in the future. Moving on.
Well, it's not a new rule. It's
right.
A point of emphasis. I get that. But let's not get this twisted. There's no new rule. This is Rule 12, Article 9 in the book, and it's the same thing that was there a year before.
So they're admitting that they were wrong last year and then calling it point of emphasis as opposed to just saying we
screwed
botched
up.
that. Right.
You should put a scale on Rodgers' back and then see what happens when a player lands on him. Right. Be like, that's only 49% of my body weight. That's not the majority of my body weight.
We're going to need some new data tracking for that, of the percentage of body weight that can come down on a player. And that is where it gets very tough. Is with Anthony Barr, do you really at full speed?
No.
Have time and you're trying to make a play there. I
asked him about it yesterday, and and I asked Sendejo about it earlier too, where for defensive players you're asked to change so much now, allegedly, and you have split second stuff. For a defensive back, that could lead to injury. If you're hesitant, that could lead to you tearing your ACL because you're trying to last second cut and make a non-crown of your head tackle. For Anthony Barr, what could he have done? He didn't throw the guy into the ground. Mm-hmm. He wrapped him up. We slowed this down. Our expert level analysis yesterday, we slowed it down. He took the 2 steps that you get before the quarterback throws the ball. 1, 2, boom, wrap up, bring him down, roll to the ground. Aaron Rodgers put his right arm down to brace himself. He broke his right clavicle because of that. I don't think it was because of the Anthony Barr hit. It was a byproduct of it.
And it's very clear that if this was Tyler Bray, that it wouldn't even be a conversation. It's really about Aaron Rodgers, but I'm okay with that. I am okay 100% with protecting the star quarterbacks in the NFL because you know what? I want to see Tom Brady play until he's 41 because he's the best. I don't want the best quarterbacks in the NFL retiring at 32. I want them to play for a very long time and be good and have the quality of my league be great. If I'm the NFL, that's my thought process. And sorry, pass rushers. Like, you can't murder the guy anymore. We apologize, but if the game is going to be at its height, it's quarterbacks that drive its success, and you don't want Aaron Rodgers killing an entire season because he fell on his clavicle, even if it was kind of his fault with the way he put his hand down,
and
even if Barr didn't do anything
reaction.
wrong.
You shouldn't have. I mean, what are you going to do? Just be like, don't put your arm down. It's
right? Yeah.
It's natural reaction.
It's always easier to point it at the defense and say you were the one who was wrong here. You should have done something else.
My fear is that these games are going to take 5.5 hours to complete because we're going to have HD officiating and we're going to have all of these. Everything's going to be reviewed. I mean, everything's reviewed as it is, but stopping the game, it's going to wreck the flow of the game. I think the first little while till they figure this out.
Yeah, it could take some time. I am a little more confident that there will be so much complaining. Remember when the NBA was going to be like super hardcore on technicals? Mm-hmm. Like if you cross your eyes at a referee after a dunk, it's technical. And that lasted like a week because the players were like,
because Draymond Green was like, you can find me, you can give me all the technicals you want. Yeah. I'm not changing.
Right. They weren't going to change. You weren't going to throw star players out of every NBA game because they didn't like foul calls. And the same thing goes here. You're not just going to eject every safety for hitting someone. And it'll normalize. It'll work itself out. I'm confident in that. Last thing, Dalvin Cook isn't saying for sure how much he's going to do when it comes to the preseason. I think he will be back and playing in preseason games. That is a huge bonus for everybody that he is seeming to be very close to 100%. The big question, and I'm going to elaborate on this, I'm sure, in a future podcast, but question for you. If the offensive line is what it is right now, is Dalvin Cook facing a uphill battle here? He praised them today. Of course he is going to. You're always going to give credit to the guys up front. But if the offensive line is what it is today, with Mike Remmers dinged up or with Mike Remmers in there, not looking like it is necessarily as strong as it was last year, how much, in your opinion, will that impact Dalvin Cook's production?
I think he's a smart enough player. Not smart enough. He's a very smart player to be able to adjust in run direction, where he has to hit the holes. I mean, this is a work in progress for him, for the offensive line, for everything, for Kirk Cousins. I mean, those protections, I think even going into the season, it's going to be a struggle for a lot of them. And I mean, for Dalvin, it's gonna, I'm looking at the numbers right now for his rush direction. So I'm getting real technical here. So he took for the majority of where he took his carries last year came either up the middle. He had 32 carries there for 137 yards, or towards the left guard. So between Pat Elflein and Nick Easton, he did 20 carries there for 75 yards. 6 outside the left tackle, so getting out towards the numbers, 9 outside the right tackle, 7 towards the right guard. So that to me is, if he's going to stay in that same direction, I think he's okay. The right side of the offensive line is where we're struggling to determine, okay, what is this? That's the biggest position battle in camp. Say what you want about the wide receivers or anything else. This is it, finding what that perfect combination is. Mike Remmers, as we said, might not be back for a couple weeks because, could be a few more days, could be a couple weeks. They're trying to be cautious with it. Right tackle, to me, is the biggest problem here because we just, we saw Rashad Hill and Brian O'Neill making, some adjustments, on Friday, and they were splitting some time, and, Rashad Hill's been coming off illness. Regardless, there's still some weak links here. And until they find out that starting 5, before the season, I think that Dalvin's going to have to really, have kind of a heads up mentality of, where he needs to be and, and especially with what direction he's going to rush in, because you don't want, him to cut the wrong way or potentially, it could hinder him in his production. I think early on, getting this group right, and, they've been trying out a lot of personnel.
So when I look at that right tackle battle and think about Dalvin Cook as the centerpiece of the offense, I can't help but think that Brian O'Neill has a chance to win the job. Because when I go back and I watch Rashad Hill last year, he just was not good as a run blocker. No. I mean, he had a really tough time getting to the second level, and he was not a guy that you could pull with. He was not a guy that you could run a lot of screens with, and I think they want to do a ton of that to get Dalvin Cook the ball. And John DeFilippo praised the heck out of Brian O'Neill's athleticism and ability to get to the second level.
That's the reason they drafted him.
Right.
And this team and what they did when Case Keenum got in and they started, making the screen game such a huge part of this offense, I think that stays. So
if O'Neill outplays Rashad Hill and even sort of holds his own against the edge rushers, even if he's not good, but just like hangs on for dear life, the upside of him might be similar to Nick Easton, where the upside of him is good enough to produce a lot of yards, where the downside will only produce a handful of maybe pressures or hits or something like that. That could be the thing they weigh, is that Rashad Hill is a more experienced pass blocker and more talented at pass blocking, but O'Neill can do a lot in terms of getting out and moving, and they might decide that that's more valuable as we go along. Or they might decide neither one of those guys is great, and Danny Isidora is going to play guard, and we're going to move Remmers. This is still something that,
I think that's the last thing that they want to have happen.
I think it's far from decided, though.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly not yet. I mean, we have yet to see when or have any indication from Mike Zimmer about when Pat Elflein's going to return too. I mean, there have been some bad snaps out there, and Kirk Cousins has let people know about it. You can hear him be like, bad snap. Nick Easton had 2 of them yesterday, and he had a few the other day. There's people worry about the chemistry building there, and that's certainly something you want to look into with Easton and Elflein and Cousins about building that. I don't think there will be any sort of hitch because Pat Elflein's an incredibly smart player, and he's been talked about working on it with Cousins so far, but there's still going to be a lot of kinks getting guys back from injury when the whole 5 of them are going to gel together. I mean, Riley Reeve's the only stable part of this.
Yeah.
He's kind of, over there on an island at left tackle, but you don't want to create a revolving door with the right tackle position. It's still a very important part of that offensive line. I don't know how much longer the Rashad Hill experiment, I don't know how long it's going to last, especially when you talk about like just some of those breakdowns in run protection that he had last season. Brian O'Neill has better upside. Will he be ready week 1 through week 5 when you go through those defenses? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm having a tough time figuring out which way it will go because in walkthrough, it's Rashad Hill with the first team, and then when we get out there, Hill has been sick, so then O'Neill is getting a lot of those reps, and there's some ups and some downs with him. I see the same thing John DeFilippo is talking about of like the quickness. He's clearly got the best quickness of anybody out there. But at the same time does not have that power yet to stop the top edge rushers. So it's good experience for Brian O'Neill, but I don't know if he's going to be ready yet. Last thing for you, our Saturday night practice is tomorrow. This has always represented kind of a big point in the training camp. Now, last year I think it was at the end, and now it's earlier on. But one thing that you are focusing on for the night practice in front of the big crowd in the new stadium?
I'm with Judd. I'm worried about this turf.
You are, huh? Okay.
It's brand new. This team has an issue with its knees to begin with. Just everybody out there, for the sake of this team and the calamity that we've already faced this season, everybody stay safe.
Yeah.
That thing has no give to it.
I'm looking at wide receivers.
Yeah. Like if I'm looking at a position group, they're the deepest right now. I already know who in my head the 6 are if we're deciding today, but there's still a ton of time for guys like Caleb Jones and maybe even a guy like Jake Winicky, guys that I don't know. Maybe you're giving me a face right now. Who do you think? I mean, I know my 6. Maybe this is a chance for Caleb Jones, Kendall Wright even to have some good, have a good outing out there tomorrow to make a case to kind of turn this around going into the 3rd week of camp.
I think Kendall Wright is going to need a good preseason if he wants to make the team.
He is.
Because today was the first time I saw him line up at all with Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. And we're how many days in? It started last Wednesday.
Like 7, 8?
Yeah, he would have gotten here at the vet, so he started last Saturday. Yeah.
So we're a week into this, and this was the first time he got some reps with the first team. That I'm sure could change depending on how things go. So we will keep an eye on that. And as you've probably noticed, we are coming fast and furious with podcasts. So we will be back shortly to break down everything that has happened in the Saturday night practice and then beyond. So we appreciate you all listening to the Purple Podcast.
This is Stephanie March, food editor of Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine, and fellow foodies, it's the most wonderful time of the year, the Minnesota State Fair. And not only are foods on a stick, I'm bringing you a podcast on a stick. It's a show released daily during the run of the fair, covering the fair's best of the best, the must-eats, the new foods, the old favorites, plus events, hidden gems, and the shows you can't miss. We're going to cover it all. Just listen to Podcasts on a Stick. Find episodes on the Podcast One app or wherever you find your podcasts.
I'm Rita Foley with an AP News Minute. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis was there to greet the McCain family last night as Senator and war hero John McCain's body was flown to a military base outside Washington. Today, McCain's body will lie in state under the Capitol Rotunda. AP Washington correspondent Sagar Magani.
After a memorial service yesterday in his adopted home of Arizona, a military jet flew McCain's body east to Joint Base Andrews, where he was greeted with an armed forces tribute. He's now lying in state at the U.S. Capitol, where he's served for so many years, and where the public will be allowed to file in on what's expected to be a stormy day here in Washington. McCain will be buried Sunday.
Ariana Grande and Stevie Wonder will sing, and former President Clinton will speak at Aretha Franklin's funeral today in Detroit. But organizers promise this will be a service, not a show. An American man's pleaded not guilty to assault in Uganda after video footage showed him punching a hotel worker. I'm Rita Fall.